So this boot here with the laces leaking off down the table and this one all pretty, is the Vans Infuse, and they're kind of their top of the line, super powerful, live free or die kind of boot. And all in all, you know, as I said from the review, I was super impressed. The boot it's a lot of fun. Vans has come a really long way. I'll show you pictures of the footprint, but it's kind of right there with Burton and Adidas in some sizing. I'm only trying the 9, so sometimes it varies from boot size to boot size. But putting this up against my size 9 Burtons and my size 9 Adidas, the Adidas is a little smaller, but it's right there with the Burtons. So, you know, across the board, especially when you get up into that 10.5, 11 kind of category, where it's probably the most critical. Still, it can be critical for a 9, but you know, if you're a small guy with a 9 and you're trying to fit into a smaller board, better to have that boot. But still, like for most people, it's the 10, 10.5, 11, 11.5 kind of range is where you kind of want to fit into something slightly smaller, and a reduced footprint like this will help. So huge improvement over past Vans. Past Vans used to be like an inch larger. So they really reduced the footprint. Let's just kind of work our way up from the inside to the outside. Maybe going with what the most simple part. This insole is not bad. I mean, I did not feel like I was lacking with this insole. Sometimes you just feel like you're just kind of like, you can't wait to upgrade the insole. It's still not the best, but this Ultra Cush insole really had a good feel to it, and I didn't once feel like, okay, so, you know, usually I'm like, just throw out the insoles as soon as you get this boot. With this one, see how it goes. Maybe keep it around a little bit. See if it works for you first, and then you can kind of trade up. You've got these like kind of hard plastic, resilient power spines that kind of go, let me see if I can do this right, kind of, let's see which one's which, down and in, something like that. They go, of course, it always happens that way. There we go. They go down and they work all the way down through the tongue and give you added response. You can put one in here, you can put both in, you can put one in on one side, one in on the other, one in and not put in one on the other side, and it improves the response. And I mainly rode that because, you know, this is a really stiff boot for Vans. And I paired these up with more free ride, you know, aggressive all mountain oriented boards and bindings, and found that it was a nice pair up. But what's cool is you can take these out and get a nice easier forward flex and kind of dial back your response. So if you're riding a quiver but you just want one boot, that's not a bad thing, because it can dial down that forward response just a little bit. It just, you know, dials it back from like, you know, a 7, 7.5, which is a good response for me. I hate the super responsive boots that are just, they're almost too twitchy. This feels like kind of like a 7, 7.5, and it can take it down to kind of like more of a mid flex instead of like medium stiff, which I really like. Now this liner is just ridiculously comfortable. They did such a good job. At first I was like, this is weird though. Let's just talk about this real quick. Velcro on one side, not on the other. Really would like to see Velcro on both sides, but for some reason it still worked. When you pulled up the lacing in here, It's a 2-pull thing. You know, you pull this down, and then there's a tab here that you, wait, let me loosen this guy up. And then there's a tab that you pull up here to kind of open it up. And there's a nice wrap. I don't know if you can see, but there is a nice wrap around the heel. So it kind of locks it in pretty well for how much it seems like it's going to be like not that good. This liner is heat moldable, and you can feel it. I'm not into really, I mean, unless I have really major hot spots, I'm really not going into a shop and having them heat molded. It's much better to break it in yourself and really have the boot slowly conform to you if you can do that, because the boot doesn't break down as fast then. Heat molding it breaks it down. What I do instead is, instead of putting it like in a pretty hot heat molder at the shops, I just put it in a boot dryer that kind of sends warm air into it all night. I usually do like a 3-step process. I put it in a boot dryer all night. Then the next day I kind of wear it around the house for like 2-3 hours while I'm just doing other things. Then I don't really crank it down. I just wear it around the house and just kind of heat it up and get it ready for the mountain. And then the morning of, when I get up, I try to put the boots on first thing, don't tighten them again, then get up to the mountain and tighten them a little bit. Just keep them super loose and slowly work your way in. After about 3-4 runs, it was a warm day though, but it was like 50-degree day when I was trying these. And the following day it was like 45, so it was super warm. But these just molded in immediately. So it might be a little slower if it's like 20 degrees, but you know, it might take a half a day instead of like 2-3 runs. But all of a sudden, like where I was feeling numb at first, it like just felt like it was just like every run it was conforming to my foot shape and becoming a part of it. So these are definitely a little more on the narrow side than Burton and Adidas and 32 and a lot of the other boots. And my feet are kind of like bordering on being wide, but they aren't wide, and they still fit this fine. I didn't feel like I was being restricted too much in my toes. And advanced skate shoes always just felt a little tight for me. I always kind of had to size up to kind of compensate for that narrow area. So if you run a little wider, you might have to go too wide. I mean, you might have to go too long to get it wide. So this kind of runs on the kind of like average to bordering on narrow, but still doable for most people. And you can see there's like neoprene here. And this heat moldable liner does kind of expand out a little bit and pack out just a touch to work for you. But now with the reduced footprint, I don't really foresee it packing out as much as I used to. Like I used to get, like with Vans, I used to get like an 8.5 to pack out to a 9. Now I'd get a 9 because the 9 felt tight right off the bat. And then after a few runs, it felt like it was going to fit fine. And now with a reduced footprint, it doesn't feel like it's going to like get too much. And I always kind of felt like the 8.5 was a little bit too small, the 9 was a little bit too big, and now I feel like the sizing is more correct for my foot. Either my foot grew a little bit in the last 10 years, 15 years since I owned a Vans boot outright and rode it like 30 days, or you know, Vans dialed out their boot. But this liner is amazing. I love this, you know, flex retention tech here. And, you know, you've got some ankle articulation right here, and it's a good amount. So of all the Vans boots, this is going to retain its flex longer. And it's really stiff, like when you go like this. And you've got, but on snow, it doesn't feel as stiff as it does in the shop when you're probably looking at it. And with this unlaced boot, you can kind of see there's a boa around the ankle to really bring it in tight and to kind of finish off what that you know, ankle support is doing in the inside. And then you have lace that goes up 2 rungs instead of 3. Then a power strap at the top, which I find more convenient. This is a boot that's pretty slow to get on and off. It's one of the slower boots I've tried, but I love, but I'm willing to sacrifice. I love it. I'm willing to sacrifice that for all the adjustability. You can go loose in the middle, tight at the bottom, tight at the top. I mean, you can play around with all of it. You can go loose at the bottom, tight in the middle, tight in the top, or gradually tighten it up as you get to the top, or, you know, I mean, it's just limitless, and it's just a fun boot for that. I'd love to see a little reinforcement in the back, like some kind of like rubbery reinforcement to kind of like improve the flex longevity. But all in all, it's a fun boot. I haven't felt like a liner like that in a while. And it's just, you know, the shock absorption's good in the heel. Not amazing, but just good. And then really minimal in the front. It's just traction. It's all rubber, man. It's just great. There's all the EVA foam is hidden behind a thick mat of rubber. So this, you know, has really good traction. It's, as you can see, it's kind of concave, so it doesn't really have a nice, easy inward roll for those who don't want a lot of pressure on your stance, but it seems to angle just a touch this way, but that's one of the reasons why I like Burton boots. A lot of Burton boots is they're, you know, center high instead of edge high, so they roll either way. This one doesn't really roll, but it does add, so it's not as easy on your joints as, let's say, you know, some of the Burton boots or some of the Adidas boots that kind of have like an easy inward lean. They're just flat, but it does give you more strength for buttering and pressing, because it kind of sticks where it is on the bindings and kind of moves it forward a little bit. Let's see what else I'm forgetting here, but the toes, pretty sturdy. It's a little soft, but it never collapsed on me yet. And, you know, I would like to see a little more reinforcement there, but, you know, there's a good curve up here. Could use a little more curve here, but it's better for the gas pedal and response. So, you know, reducing the toe and heel drag is pretty high with this boot. All in all, I'm really impressed with the Infuse, and I feel it's a great choice for somebody who wants something that can be responsive one day, pretty responsive on the upper tier of response one day, and then the next be a little softer if you're riding a quiver. You know, you driving hard free ride powder boards one day, and then you just want to kind of mellow it out the next day and go ride park, or do kind of more of a buttery all mountain freestyle board. You can make it work with this, and it's kind of a nice setup for that reason, and a very recommendable boot, especially with the reduced footprint. And the comfort factor, everything is great. If Burton boots are a little too wide for you, Adidas boots are a little too wide, then you'll find that the Vans Infuse might be a much better fit. And, you know, heel hold, everything. If you want it, if you don't. I didn't really care too much about the middle boa, but I liked that it was there, especially for those that want it. And if I just wanted to feel a little more supportive, a little more tight, I could crank that down a little bit more, and it worked. I never over crank, but you know, all in all, I can't say enough good things about this boot. I'm really impressed, and I think the only turnoff will be for some is the on and off ease, but I wouldn't freak out about that. So many of you guys freak out about you can only do speed lace or boa, but if you're somebody who lives for adjustability like I do, it's worth the extra 20-30 seconds to dial out your boot, that it'll take longer than it would for speed lace or boa.